What's going on, everybody? Want to welcome you back to another episode of the HuntStand podcast. This is your man, Will, coming back for another great episode. On today's episode, we're going to have Mr. Wild Turkey Doc himself, Mike Chamberlain, coming on to help us debunk a few turkey myths that have been out there running amok and creating confusion. Some do, some may not, but nonetheless, we're going to get him on here to help us figure out some of these. You know, some of them might be true, but most of them are probably going to get debunked, I hope. And of course, we're going to talk turkey hunting with Mike. That's just what we're going to do on the podcast. Y'all, we just want to thank y'all too for tuning into the HuntStand podcast. We greatly appreciate it. You got a ton of other options out there to listen to, so we just want to thank y'all for tuning in to the HuntStand podcast. If you can, make sure you go on over and rate, review, and subscribe this podcast for us. It greatly helps us, and we really appreciate it. And y'all, if you got questions, topics, things you want me to hear and talk about on the podcast, make sure you send me an email, podcast@huntstand.com. But with further ado, we're going to get Mike on here to talk turkeys and debunk these myths. So hang tight, y'all, and we hope you enjoy. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the HuntStand podcast. And today we have Mr. Turkey Doc himself, Mike Chamberlain, hopping on with us today. Mike, we appreciate you hopping on the podcast today.
Not a problem. Glad to join you.
Now, where are you located?
I'm at the University of Georgia, so okay. I'm right here in Athens, Georgia.
Okay. Well, today, one of the reasons why we're getting you on the podcast is we want to try and debunk some myths that are out there about turkey and turkey hunting, if you're down for that.
Sure.
Well, Mike, first thing I like to do to get this podcast rolling is I like for you, the guest, to kind of give myself and the listeners a 30-foot tree stand view of who you are and just a little bit about your background. So tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm a faculty member at the University of Georgia. I've been in academics for about 25 years now. Been studying turkeys really since I was a graduate student back at Mississippi State. I grew up in Virginia, just a suburban kid that hunted with his dad on the weekends, and went to Virginia Tech and got a degree in wildlife science there, and then was lucky enough to get a gig in grad school at Mississippi State. So I did my master's degree and my PhD degree there, both studying turkeys, among other things. And I was fortunate to leave MSU and walk into a faculty position at Louisiana State University, where I worked for 10 years before I came here. And I've been studying turkeys ever since 1993, really. So it's been a good career. I've been very fortunate, and my hobbies are pretty simple. I hunt and fish, and that's pretty much what I do with my spare time. I like to be outside.
Not a bad way to spend your spare time. So who got you obsessed with turkeys, or just who got you obsessed with hunting in general?
Well, my dad was the prototypical weekend warrior. He ran his own business, so he worked really, really hard. And at the time, you could only hunt on Sunday where I grew up, on Saturday. I'm sorry. So we had one day per week that we could get outside and hunt. And
really,
yeah. So we would go hunt on Saturdays, and I became a fanatical hunter. And then as I aged and went to grad school and was able to visit different places and meet people and get more opportunities to do different things outside of my back 40, I really became obsessed with it. And fast forward now, I'm 50 now, and I've been hunting since I was a little kid, and I can't imagine a life where I didn't spend my fall in a deer stand or my spring chasing toms. I can't even imagine.
You and me both. I'm right there with you. Heck, I don't even know what I'd be doing for work if I wasn't obsessed with it.
Yeah.
Let's dive into turkeys and turkey hunting. So there's a lot of myths that I have seen, read about, heard about, and I'm going to just kind of start throwing these at you a little bit, almost rapid fire, if you will. Now, some of these, you know, you might be able to just debunk it a couple of words, and a couple of them you might just, hey, we'll go down some rabbit holes. That's okay. That's what podcasting is for, right?
Yeah, sure.
So, first one I got for you, turkeys roost in the same tree every night is one I've heard. Is that true?
No. You see that there are some toms that will roost pretty much in the same spot, but most do not. What we see is most toms they may roost in this place for a couple of nights, and then they move to a different part of their range. They roost there, then they move somewhere else. And what we do see, which is pretty interesting, is we see one tom vacate his roost, and that night a different tom will use that same roost. Really? So you actually have, you know, multiple birds that will roost at the same location, but not at the same time. If you look across all the individual birds we've marked, it's more likely than not that they will not return to the same spot each night. Although it does occur, it's more likely that it does not occur.
Okay. So I guess the next one I have for you is still kind of pertaining to the roost in general. Overcalling causes a turkey to stay roosted.
That I don't know. Here's what I think based on what I know about turkeys. If you kind of look at it from their perspective, roost sites are safety.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, they sleep in a tree for a reason, because things eat them on the ground. Mm-hmm. So when they're in a tree, they're presumably at a spot where they feel comfortable. And if you kind of think about it, if it's time to fly down and they don't feel comfortable, the best bet is to stay in the tree and let whatever is occurring leave.
Okay.
That's what I think is going on. I've hunted birds that stayed in the tree and ultimately, you know, flew down away from me. Or I'll never forget this one bird. I ended up having to go to work, and at 9:15 he was still in the tree. And I remember driving to work thinking, you know what, damn, I know what happened there. I got too close to him, and he didn't feel like bailing off the opposite direction made sense, given it was really thick in that direction, and he just waited me out. And I think that's what happened that day. So I think there may be some validity to it, that, you know, they get spooked and they think the best reaction is just to stay put, and it usually works out for them.
Okay. So with you and your background then, you know, how close is too close when hunting the roost? I know I think there's a couple of states out there that actually have laws and regulations in place that you can't hunt within X amount of feet or yardage from that roosting tree, but how close is too close to hunt in your opinion?
And I think it just depends on the bird and the situation. You know, most of the time we find, I mean, and you see this in your own hunting activities, you know, these birds roost in areas where they can get to the roost and get out of the roost easily.
Yeah.
So, you know, usually there's some visibility there. They can see, but there's also enough cover around them to where they feel comfortable, you know, gobbling and strutting and doing their thing. Mm-hmm. So I think it just depends on the situation. I've personally gone into birds that I felt like I was plenty far away, and ended up, you know, bumping the bird because of the terrain or whatever. And I've also ended up way too close to birds, but didn't mean to, just ended up too close because they were gobbling away from me and turned around on the limb, and I realized I was much closer than I thought. And those turned out okay, you know, in some situations. So I think it just ultimately depends on the bird and the roost, and also how quietly you can get in there. You know, I mean, turkeys have an acute sense of hearing, and they have an incredible sense of direction because of the way that their ears function. So they hear a sound that they don't think is right. They can hear that sound from quite a distance. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of factors play into answering that question.
Okay, I gotcha. So let's put your hunting cap on for a second. How do you like to approach hunting birds on the roost in the morning?
I tend to be the guy that if I know something about the property that I'm hunting, I tend to try to end up putting myself in a position where I'm somewhere they want to be, or I'm in a direction that I think the bird is logically going to head when he flies down. And so I don't try to get right up under him. I try to stay far enough away to where I can make a subtle call. He can hear me, but he's got to fly down and travel a little bit to get to me. Okay. And I think I've done that because I have been bitten by the I got too close bug.
Yeah.
So that's the way I tend to hunt. I've never been one of these guys that tries, let me get as close as I possibly can so that when he flies down and his feet touch the ground, I'll be able to shoot. I've had that happen a few times, but I really didn't mean to.
Yeah.
I tend to be someone that stays a little farther away and puts myself in a position where I think they already want to be going in that direction anyway, which, sometimes takes some scouting to do, but that's kind of the way I approach it.
Okay. So this next question I have, I'm conflicted about this one myself because I've had this happen to me. I hunt on a small piece of private property in Texas. It's where I'm from, where I live. And we had some neighbors come in and they put in a high fence back behind us. We used to be all low fence until then. And kind of took away the turkeys because there was a creek that runs through this property and they roost on that creek during the spring. Well, right now they're all over the game cameras eating food and everything. But this one says turkeys won't cross fences. And the reason I lead to believe this one from a personal vendetta is I've called these birds up to this fence 100 different times. I can get them to gobble their heads off for 15, 20, 30 minutes, and they will not roost over this dadgum fence.
Yeah. I've seen this play out in a number of circumstances. I've hunted on properties that either were high fenced or had a neighbor that was fenced. And I've hunted birds a lot in situations where it was low fenced, like just barbed wire type fence.
Yeah.
And I have seen fences in a variety of ways affect how Tom moves, whether it's he just doesn't want to cross it, whether he doesn't seem like he wants to fly over it. They can easily, obviously. I mean, they can easily jump over a fence or fly over a fence, but they don't in a lot of situations. And I actually had a Tom one time in Kansas, and it was literally a single strand of barbed wire, and he could have stepped over it, and he would not do that. He would walk into it, and it would hit him about just below his beard, and he would bounce I could see him. He would touch it, and he would turn around and walk off, and then he would come back and he would walk down it, and he would bump into it again, and he would walk off. To the point where I was literally saying almost out loud, just step over it, buddy. I mean, you can literally just step over that. and he wouldn't, and I never killed that bird. He ended up losing interest and walked off. And the irony is I didn't even know the fence was there. From where I was, I ended up getting close to this bird, not knowing it was there until he gobbled. And so I was kind of in a rush to set up, and because of the terrain, I couldn't see the fence. I couldn't see all of the fence. And when he started bumping into it, I was like, what is he bumping into? And when he walked off, I took my binoculars from my chest, and I was like, that is a piece of barbed wire. and he kept bumping into it, and finally left. And when I got up and walked over, it was like 65, 70 yards from me. I saw it was a single strand piece of barbed wire, and he just would not walk over. So
Man,
they do some strange things.
Yeah, they do. I tell you, turkeys, they make me pull my hair out sometimes. I mean, in that same situation I was telling you about, there was a hole probably about 5 yards down from where he was that these pigs, we've got a really bad pig problem down at our place, that they had actually rooted underneath the fence to get onto our side. It was just this giant hole underneath. And he'd go over there, that bird would go over there and just look at it, and he'd start trying to duck underneath it, and the same thing. That fence would just barely touch his head, and he just didn't know how to get under or over, for that matter. So it's pretty interesting. Pretty dang interesting what these birds do. So these next couple of questions, I guess, can kind of pertain to more of spooking birds, if you will. So the next one was, you can never call back a spooked bird.
That's false. I can attest to that personally, because I've done it.
Yeah.
Now I haven't done it a lot, but I have done that, and I know other friends and colleagues that have done that as well. What we've seen with the work we've done with where we GPS mark toms, and we also have hunters carrying GPS, so we can look at how they're interacting with each other. There's no average response from a tom to getting bumped by a hunter. Some of them seem to move away quickly and then settle back down. Some of them seem to head to the hills, and they move a mile and then they settle down. Some just kind of skirt the pressure and go back, to their daily routine pretty quickly, and everything in between. So what the take home that I tell people is, there's no such thing as an average tom. And I think that is true when it comes to looking at how they are, respond to pressure and us bumping them, because, sometimes they know exactly what's happening, and sometimes they don't. They just know that something, threw my flag here, but I'm not exactly sure what it was. That's one scenario versus, say, gunshot going off, or a hunter, moving and them seeing you clearly that, that's danger. So I really think it depends on the bird, and it depends on the circumstances that spooked the bird to begin with, because the bird I ended up calling back and killing, I don't think he knew exactly what was going on. I think he just, for whatever reason, he didn't like the situation when he crested that hill. And, I thought it was ball game, and, and 30 minutes later it wasn't. When clearly he putted and he took off, and I, there's no way I'll kill this bird. And I did. I ended up, he started gobbling again not long after. And like I said, I went after him and killed him. But that certainly that's the only time that's happened to me, actually.
Okay. So the next one then is, there's a myth going around that says that when a group of gobblers come in, one gets shot, that group of birds will not regroup for weeks. That's
false. What we see is those groups of toms are in social groups. So, those birds know each other. They have an established pecking order or dominance hierarchy, if you will. There's a dominant bird, and then there's a second, a third, or whatever. And they've spent a lot of time around each other. They know each other. Could you shooting one of those birds kind of disrupt that? Sure, it does. But just the act of removing one tom from that group doesn't usually result in them disbanding that group at all. In fact, you'll often see they just continue about their business, missing one. What we end up seeing happen is, which can kind of be coincidental, is as the breeding season progresses and you start getting later into the breeding season, you'll see toms that will split off from these groups and go do their own thing and then come back together. And I've actually posted this on social media, these animations, which are really cool, where you've got 4 or 5 birds that are together and 2 of them stay together all the time. One day there's 3 of them. Mm-hmm. One day there's 5 of them. The next day it's back to 2. Then there's 4, because there's individual birds in that group that are leaving and going off somewhere else in their range and then returning. I think that may be what people think is going on when they harvest a bird and then they don't see them anymore. They only see one, or they think the group is dissolved. It's not really that.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Talking about breeding season there kind of leads me into this next question. And this is one that I've heard a lot from people, is that a warmer winter moves up the breeding schedule.
That's false. What happens is, so the breeding is primarily driven by photoperiod, so increasing day length. Mm-hmm. What we see from a cold to a warm winter is literally a difference of a couple of days. Like, we may see, here's a good example. A few years ago, we had an incredibly cold, severe winter in the deep south. And we saw that the breeding season, as we infer it based on when they start nesting, was about a week and a half, late. And we think, the only logical explanation was, you literally had this incredibly cold period right in the middle of the time when they were breeding, and it kind of set everybody back. They went from everything is good to now I've got to hunker down and conserve energy and find resources that I did, in a way I didn't think I was going to have to do. So that kind of slowed the clock down, if you will. But we're literally, in most years, we see amazing consistency in when nesting occurs. And that what that tells you is that breeding is very consistent from one year to the next. We're literally talking about a couple of days here and there each year.
All right, Joe, we're going to interrupt this podcast real quick to thank Work Sharp Tools, the knife sharpening company. If you've got some knives in your drawer that literally just aren't cutting it, make sure y'all head on over to worksharptools.com and check out all the great knife sharpening products they have. We've been utilizing them heavily over the past years in just everything we do when we're out in the woods. I keep one right next to the cleaning station whenever I'm cleaning up a deer, turkey, whatever it may be, because it's inevitable that I'll have a knife that gets a little bit dull, just isn't doing the job. So I can sharpen it real quick and get back to what I'm doing. So if you can, head on over to worksharptools.com, check out everything they have to offer, and we're going to get right back to the podcast. This one's more a question for you rather than a myth, because I got a couple more, but I kind of wanted to find out from you, just going back to talking about how a turkey goes out of its range and comes back. What have you seen, or how far have you seen a turkey disperse or move during, let's say, the spring season, just to keep it kind of constrained to that? Like, how much have you seen a bird move during the spring?
Most of the time if we're looking at GPS data, a couple miles. If we're looking at, banding data, we've had some pretty, interesting, a tom gets banded here and the next year he shot 10 miles down the road somewhere. But it's usually not that far. From the time we capture them as jakes until they're harvested as an adult, it's usually within a handful of miles. Sometimes it can be farther, but it's usually not that far. It's not like they're dispersing like a coyote does, 50 miles or 75 miles. They're not moving that far.
Wow. Now, have you seen pressure affect that a lot? Like just hunting pressure? Do you see birds will move miles away because they get spooked by a hunter? or are they pretty patternable and they're habitual to where they come back and get back to what they were doing?
No, we've seen some that literally took off. We had a couple of situations where this was a number of years ago where we actually hunted birds intentionally. We put GPS units on them, and then we went and hunted that bird. We knew where they were, obviously, and we put hunters on them so that we could see how they'd respond to pressure. And I can remember a few of these that stick out. We had one bird that got bumped on a youth hunt, and he traveled about a half mile to the north and settled back down all week. And then the following weekend, when the general season opened, he got bumped again. And that time he went well over a mile that day and went to an area that, based on the data we had, he had not been to before. I'm sure he had. We just didn't have the data to show it. And he stayed there for weeks, and he ended up getting killed up there, and he never went back to where he had been. And we have a number of situations like that where, a bird gets bumped by a person and they go a mile or more and go to some place that they had not been, in the days and weeks prior to that happening. And I suspect some of that is learned behavior. These are birds that have experienced this before. They know, okay, pressure's on, I'm going to change how I behave. We see this a lot on public lands, in fact, where we got birds that leave the public land and go hang out on nearby private lands as soon as the season opens. Those are birds that have experienced that before.
So then, in regard to public land, do you see the public pressure really affecting how much they gobble?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we've published a number of papers showing clearly that increased hunting pressure causes reductions in gobbling activity, and that's not a shocking result, obviously, but and that's been shown in studies long before I came along. As the pressure ramps up, gobbling starts to decline, and as the season progresses on these heavily hunted public lands, which is where I do a lot of my work, you see gobbling really, really decline. Not just because birds are getting bumped or spooked, but you're killing some birds, so some of your vocal birds are being shot, but you're also seeing situations where the birds that are still there are not gobbling as much, if at all, with pressure, as pressure gets higher and higher. So that the bird definitely responds to pressure. I mean, they sense the pressure and they change their behavior. Yeah.
I've seen that a lot. Heck, I've even seen that on private property, just one encounter and that bird is done,
Yeah.
So the next couple of these I have for you were kind of interesting that I saw that people were asking, or that I thought were kind of funny. But I guess the first one is turkeys avoid heavy cover.
Most of the year they do. Most of the year, turkeys are, outside of hens when they're nesting, during that period they're trying to hide. For the rest of the year, turkeys make a living by being able to see. They have to be able to see. That's their primary means of escaping danger, is to see it coming. So you tend to see turkeys using areas where they can see, and that's open areas, or forests that are open where they can see through the forest vegetation. So yeah, you definitely do see birds avoid super dense, thick areas.
Okay. So then, this kind of leads me on my next one that I think you'll probably get a kick out of these. Turkeys will not go uphill, and you can't call a turkey downhill. What do you think about those?
Both are false. But I know where those come from. I know where those come from. I've heard people say it. I've even thought it myself.
Really?
At times, I'll never forget. I had a bird in Mississippi one time.
Okay.
And he would not he roosted up on top of this ridge, and he would not come down the hill in either direction. He would walk down the ridge, and he was impossible to get to because you could not get to the top of the ridge without him seeing you from where he was roosted. And this bird would roost in this tree, the same tree, every 3 to 5 nights. And the rest of the time he was on private land. So I would just catch him periodically, and I know it was the same bird, it had to be, because he did the same thing every day, and I just could not figure out a way to get to this bird, and he would not walk down those hills. He just would not.
Seriously?
I could not figure out a way to get him to come down the hills. And that bird probably died of old age because I sure didn't kill him. But I've never had any issue getting them to come uphill. And since then I've killed turkeys that went uphill, downhill, across hill. I had a bird in Virginia fly. I mean, he probably flew 500 or 600 yards to get to me. Across the side of a mountain one time. So I mean, they'll do all sorts of crazy things. It's hard to predict what a bird's going to do, and sometimes I wonder whether they even know exactly what they're about to do. I mean, that's part of the turkey hunting. You're trying to appeal to their, you're trying to excite them. You're trying to get them, get them going, and
yeah,
sometimes it causes them to do some things that don't make sense to us.
Yeah, sometimes I don't understand why a turkey does what they do. They are very, very interesting creatures, to say the least. This one I've seen before, which I could actually debunk this myself, but I want to ask you why people might think this, but turkeys only gobble in the spring.
Yeah, no, they don't. They gobble year-round. They just gobble more in the spring.
Now, that's more from a breeding perspective, but when you look at the fall time, it's more... Why do they gobble in the fall?
We think that that's more of a dominance issue, where you've got birds that are still, they're trying to sort out their dominance hierarchies, and they'll gobble to maintain those hierarchies. And we also know that, toms will become receptive a lot faster than hens do. So that's why you'll often see toms that are gobbling in February, for instance, and yet breeding season is more than a month away. Mm-hmm. They become receptive well before hens do, it on the order of about 45 days or more. So you do see gobbling in times that are not associated with breeding. And we think some of it is just dominance driven. Honestly, I think sometimes it's just, they just do it. I've heard birds gobble in the fall. In fact, I had a bird in Virginia one time that came to me while I was deer hunting, and he was gobbling his head off, and he was by himself.
Really?
Yep. He was gobbling like any spring morning, and he was by himself. He walked right by me, and when he finally saw my blaze orange, he spooked, but that bird was by himself and was gobbling as if he was coming to a call, and I never heard a call. He was just gobbling. So, I think sometimes we try to predict what this bird's going to do, and it's just unpredictable sometimes.
Yes, they are. Yeah. Now, kind of going back to that blaze orange, I've always kind of heard people go back and forth on this. Is are turkeys colorblind, or do they see color?
They just see colors differently than we do. They have different arrangements of rods and cones in their eyes. Mm-hmm. So they see colors differently than we do, and we don't really completely understand exactly how they see colors, but they just see their world differently, and the way their eyes work, they are predisposed to being able to see motion, and that's why they're so good at picking you out when you flinch, or you move your head, or it's not so much the color, it's the motion because of the way their eyes function. Yeah.
I'd say definitely can't get away with as much movement as I do with deer when it comes to turkey hunting.
Oh, no, definitely.
So the next two I have kind of pertain to water. One is turkeys don't like rain, and they will not cross water?
I don't know if it's they don't like rain. I mean, I don't like standing in the rain either. What you'll see turkeys do is they will, when it rains, they typically will go find areas where they can stand in the open and dry off quickly. When the rain stops, you'll often see birds that while it's raining, they'll go to open areas because we think it's because everything's moving in the woods, if you will. There's water dripping everywhere. It's loud. Their senses are dulled. They can't see as well. They can't hear as well. So they get out in the open to protect themselves. As far as them not crossing water, there's some truth to that. I mean, there are situations I've been in where, I've had birds that refuse to cross a piece of water. And I've also been in situations where I had birds that flew across a body of water. I killed a Merriam's in Nebraska one year that literally flew the Niobrara River to us.
Really?
Yeah. And we had seen that bird do that the morning before. That's why we ended up there at 10:30 a.m. because the day before he had done the same thing. He had a routine, and we just happened to be part of it that next day, and he came right to us, right across the river, as if he had no cares in the world because he had done that before. So I think it just depends. Again, I hate to keep saying it just depends on the bird, but I really do think there's so much individual variation that it really does just depend on the bird and the situation.
No, I agree. I mean, like, there's some birds out there, kind of like the one you're just talking about, that will fly over a dadgum river. But then there's others that they can't walk over a single strand of barbed wire.
Yeah,
and these turkeys are temperamental. They're very moody. I guess is a good way to put it.
Yeah, in some ways, yeah.
So, Cal, one of the last questions I have for you is, obviously you've hunted turkey in the fall, you've hunted them in the spring. What time of year do you prefer the most to hunt turkey? Which I think I know the answer to this, and why?
Definitely in the spring. Yeah, I grew up fall turkey hunting, but I have not done that in years, and not that I wouldn't again. I just it's not nearly as engaging as spring hunting is, and I have so many competing interests on my time in the fall. I love to deer hunt, I love to waterfowl hunt, and I love to do other things in the fall, and spring is my that's my time to go chase turkeys. And I enjoy being in the woods in the spring. It's completely different. Mm-hmm. So the fact the birds are gobbling and they're displaying and they're so engaging, to me, it's hands down spring hunting.
Now, have you hunted all over the United States, or have you completed any Grand Slams, Super Slams, anything at all?
I've done single season slams, yeah. And I enjoy traveling. I've hunted turkeys. I've hunted a lot of stuff all over the place, and I've been fortunate to be able to do that. And I look forward to that every spring. I look forward to being able to take a trip or more than one trip if my luck is on my side, and go visit some other place where turkeys are. I really enjoy that because I enjoy seeing different places where turkeys are living, but two, you meet cool people as you travel around, and you get different perspectives when you're around different people and people that hunt differently than I do. And I think in the end, it makes you a much better turkey hunter if you're able to travel around and put yourself in situations where you're getting your tail kicked, not just in your back 40, but you're experiencing birds in different environments.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I feel too many people, I think, are afraid to fail or get their teeth kicked in, kind of like you're saying. And that's where you learn the most. And I can say that from experience, but I feel like that's where a lot of people learn the most, is from those failures.
Oh, there's no question. There's no question. If you're willing to embrace failure and just step back and go, okay, why did this, what happened here? Or what do I think happened?
Yeah.
That makes you a better turkey hunter.
100%. What would you say is the best part about what you do for a career?
Oh, I would say, gosh, that's a tough question. I would say probably two things. One would be I draw immense satisfaction out of seeing people care about my work, whether it's somebody sending me a message on social media and saying, "Hey, I appreciate what you do," or "I learned a lot from that," or "I experienced that. Thank you for pointing it out." That's really that's something I enjoy. The other thing would just be my students, training my graduate students and seeing them become professionals. That's very rewarding to me, because those are the people that are going to be running our agencies and responsible for our resources when I'm long gone. And I carry a lot of pride in being able to work with those people.
Passing the torch on, making sure that we keep getting to do what we get to do.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Man, that at the end of the day, that's all you can ask for. So I guess another question I have for you is, do you get, like, you've got a pretty large following on social media. You've got 40,000 followers. So do you get messages during the spring, a lot of messages from people asking you what to do in certain situations, like as they're out in the woods? Do you ever get messages like that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I get a lot of messages like that. I've had people that sent me maps, and were like, "Hey, what would you do here?" And I try to respond to every message I get. I honestly, it's impossible, really. I mean, but I try to respond to as many people as I can, because I know they're contacting me because they value my opinion, and I appreciate that, and I don't want to overlook that. But sometimes I just can't. I can't. But yeah, I get a lot of those. I get a lot of hunters that are new hunters to turkey, to the turkey hunting ranks, and they haven't killed a bird, and they're trying to figure out, what they're doing wrong. And I'm always, more than happy to help people like that, because I remember being there. I remember, getting my tail kicked every single time and being like, what is it going to take for me to get over the hump here? And, and I finally did. And that's, what hooked me to the sport. And so I know where they've been. And so I try to help when I can.
Yeah. That's all you can do. That's pretty awesome that you do that, because I know there are some folks out there that just, they don't even respond to DMs at all. But the fact that you take the time to do that speaks volumes. So I know, like you said, a lot of people respect that.
Yeah, and I wish I could do it. I wish I could do it more. I went on Facebook yesterday, actually, and Facebook's kind of interesting, because the way it shows your messages, it can vary from your desktop to your phone. And
yep.
And I saw on my phone, I literally had, like, I have hundreds of messages that I haven't responded to, partially because I didn't see them. I didn't even know they were there. And I felt really bad. I was like, and I actually went and responded to 3 or 4 or 5, because, I just felt bad about it. But there's just not enough time in the day to respond. And that's a good thing, because that means people are interested, and they want the information, and that's great. It's just, I wish I had more time to put towards it.
Yeah. Well, Mike, tell us real quick, tell all the listeners, if they do want to message you, or they just want to follow you on social media, where can they find you? On Instagram, Facebook, or, do you have a YouTube channel or anything?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Wild Turkey Doc. That's Wild Turkey DOC. It's just all one word. And I post on, Instagram and Twitter with that same handle. My Facebook page is just my name. If you just type in Michael Chamberlain, you'll find me. And then I don't have a YouTube channel yet. I'm actually in the process of designing one now, so that I can post videos and kind of a little more engaging content than I'm able to do on social media. The way I've been using it, it's just taking me a little bit of time to do that, but that's in the works right now.
Gotcha. Well, I love it, man. Well, Mike, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to knock this podcast out with us. Talk to the HuntStand listeners, talk with me, talk turkey hunting, and debunk some of the myths that are out there.
Not a problem. It's good talking to you.
Likewise, man. I know we're going to have to get you back on here again, of course, talk turkey, and I know you're a big deer hunter too, so we'll definitely get you on here again, Mike. So thanks again for hopping on.
Yep, thank you.
And there you have it, everybody. Wild Turkey Doc debunking some of these crazy and ridiculous myths about turkey hunting that have gotten into my email. I've seen them on the internet, and he was able to debunk and verify a couple of these. And so we just want to thank y'all again for tuning in to another episode of the HuntStand podcast, and we will see you on the next one.